All right, Rick and Judy are here. And remember Judy in your thoughts, she's going for some eye work tomorrow. Mark and Michelle Tanzi are here. You need to know, I sent something to Michelle, I'm serious, the United States Post Office cannot find her address in Winfield, Illinois. Seriously, cannot find her address. Felix Becerra may be moving, and I've got it on good news. He's throwing a house party for the entire congregation. He'll be having it supplied at his expense with fresh cracked lobster, the best of the best, pastries from the best. Yes, isn't that right, Felix?
Yes. The caveat is that everybody needs to bring 10 guests. Otherwise, it's off.
Bobby Vance has that absolutely wretched real background. That is so annoying. Look at that. Look at nature itself back there in Kissimmee. All right, Pam is here with us this morning. Maureen is here. Alan and Eddie are either in New York, or Washington D.C. I'm not sure yet. Really, Pat is in New York. Pam is in New York. Maureen has got near the Redland. Kay Schweitzer is 10 miles west of Merritt Island. Ray is up in Washington Heights with his cats. John and Christine are in Port Orange. Danny is in New York. Cecilia's down the street. Chris Diaz is in North Miami. And Cindy and Larry Deach are in Port Orange. Cindy and Larry, can you hear me? Cindy and Larry, are you there yet? Okay, I sent Larry something too. You'll all see the results of this in a little while.
Yes,
okay.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay, Cindy and Larry, be on the lookout for something. I sent you a special package yesterday. It should be there in a couple of days.
I hope something's there for me and not just him.
Oh. Oh, this is too much. This is just.
Yeah, you're embarrassed now, aren't
you? Yes, well, there you go. All right. Okay, so let me go through what we got here this morning. Reminders. There are lots of congregations through all Stone Crab too, of course. Felix is on all of this, wherever you went. Okay. Now look, there are lots of congregations throughout the United States of all denominations that slow down in the summertime. Years and literally years ago, we had at a church I was at a guy named, I just happened to forget his name. Oh, come on. Lyle Schaller. Lyle Schaller was one of the preeminent church consultants, and he said, never, ever slow down in the summer. He said, you offer full programs year-round. You keep it going, he said, because when you have to start up in the fall, it takes forever to get going. If you've never slowed down, there's nothing to start up. He said, your congregation will be with you. They will stay with you. And of course, he didn't realize we have Zoom. So I want to remind everybody, we do the following. Connections will be meeting throughout the summer. Book Club meets throughout the summer. We still have services twice a month. And Pastoral Care will resume with house calls, because I have a chance to make house calls this summer for people who we've not seen. I've phoned with, but we'll be doing that. Michelle and I'll be going over things. And guess what I'm putting together? Now, this is going to sound silly, but to show you the kinds of things that we did not catch up on, I do not have a phone book for All Souls. It's all on my phone. It's in my phone, the numbers of everybody on my phone. So I never had a place to object. So I will be spending the next 2 weeks taking the phone numbers from my phone and placing them objectively for the board so people have how to get hold of people. You know, when you got 30 members, it's no big thing. We got 130. It's about time you have to make some switches. So this summer we'll be making some administrative changes to upgrade everything. So just to let you know. So I'll have for the board and others as well. All right. Mother's Day is going to be different this year. Judy Homer wrote a really good poem about all kinds of mothers. We'll use that. But I wanted us this year, since I'm sharing, to concentrate on the family. And so we're going to have a very, very interesting discussion about the family as it is now, not as it was. Now, a lot of you are very young. You were not plagued with Leave It to Beaver, Ozzie and Harriet, and Father Knows Best. I bet you don't know any of these things are, but this was the ideal. This was the way the family had to be. And this became like the thing. Well, it wasn't true then, but that's the way we were told it had to be. The way the American family is today is so radically changed, and we have never discussed that ever in All Souls. And I was embarrassed to look at that. So I have done a ton of research, and now Grimmy reminds me, hello, I could have used AI. Little behind the scene here. So Maureen says change for the better, I would say, and I would agree with her 100%, but that's in 2 weeks. Okay, one last thing too, please remember, we have never really pushed giving because the giving has always been kind and generous. Just to remind everybody that we need to keep up in the summer as well, because we have the same programs throughout the summer. If you would be so kind to remember that. Whatever you can, we have a lot of people who are on very tight budgets. Your attendance is giving. Your attendance is giving. Your time is giving. It's not just money. But for those of you who also have some extra money, that helps as well very, very much. Okay, our lighting of the candle today is going to be, and I hope you can get the nuances here. There are protests on college campuses that have been met with the same violence as in the 1960s. We don't seem to have learned anything. Let me just say, you can protest Israel's behavior towards towards the West Bank, not getting after settlers that are mauling and shooting people who live on the West Bank. You can protest Israel's killing of women and children in the Gaza and not be anti-Semitic. You can protest the way people are being treated in the West Bank and people are being killed on the Gaza and not arguing whether Israel should exist or not. But when Israel misbehaves like everybody else, that's not being anti-Semitic, it's calling them out. And so I am very concerned that there does not seem to be any nuances on college campuses. It's like you're anti-Semitic if you have a legitimate complaint. So this is not about whether Israel exists or not, or has the right. Of course it does. But we want to remember the right of also calling out people who do bad things and letting settlers shoot up and maim and destroy legitimate people who live on the West Bank. What about all those innocent children and women who died in Gaza, who had nothing to do with any of this? So we light our candle in remembrance of nuances. Things are not black and white. They're often messy. And we need to help separate that out. So I light my candle for nuances in incredibly difficult times. Incredibly difficult times. Our introit, give a little bit. What an appropriate introit. Thank you, Michelle. Give a little bit. Blessings to all. 1977. 1977. Still sound just as good. Our call to worship this morning, for those of you who would read it, be kind enough to read it with me. Every minute of every hour of every day, you are making the world just as you are making yourself. And you might as well do it with generosity and kindness and style. And again, a morning prayer by those who wish, if you would read it with me. God of awe and wonder, creator of both night and day, you count the number of the stars and call them by their names. Help us to share and conserve its resources, that we may grow in reverence for all creation and live in harmony with one another. Amen. In another group from the past, Led Zeppelin.
the sun refused to shine, I would still be loving you. When mountains crumble to the sea, there will still be you and me. Kind of woman, I give you my all. Kind of woman, nothing more. Little drops of rain, whisper of the pain, tears of love lost in the days gone by. My love is strong, here there is no wrong. Together we shall go until we die. My inspiration's what you are to me. Inspiration, look, see. And so today my world, it smiles. Your hand in mine, we walk the miles. Thanks to you, it will be done. For you to me are the only one. All right, yeah. Happiness, no more be sad. Happiness, I'm glad. If the sun refused to shine, I would still be loving you. Mountains crumble to the sea, there will still be you and me.
Reading for us today is Bobby Vance, who will be doing the both readings and leading us in the responsive reading. Bobby, if you'd be so kind with the first reading. The way for Remy to pull it up.
Okay. The burden of what Jesus says is this: give it away. Give it away gladly. Make friends by your generosity. The door to a gospel future is by generosity, outrageous, intentional giving away in the present to create a viable future. That seems to me such an urgent word because we are so deeply caught in cycles of greed and affluence and self-indulgence and acquisitiveness of a fearful kind that will yield no human future.
And Bobby's going to lead us in the responsive reading, and I will lead us in the response to his.
To be generous means
To redefine our boundaries.
for the generous person, borders are permeable.
What is yours? Your suffering, your problems is also mine.
This is compassion.
What is mine? My possessions, my body,
My knowledge and abilities,
my time and resources, my energy is also yours.
this is generosity. Gratitude begins in our hearts and then dovetails into behavior. It almost always makes you willing to be of service, which is where the joy resides. It means that you are willing to stop being such a jerk. When you are aware of all that has been given to you in your lifetime and the past few days, it is hard not to be humbled and pleased to give back.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you for the reading.
So today I'd like to share some words about generosity. Generosity. We are called by our faith to cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, our presence, and our resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in a relationship of interdependence and mutuality. Generosity is essential to increasing the common good. Given how so much good currently accrues to so few, Unitarian Universalist minister Richard Gilbert famously asked, "How much do we deserve?" There are too many who deserve more, but their needs can only be addressed through a reimagining of the common good. I've been thinking about generosity lately and the different ways generosity can be demonstrated. Generally, I've defined it in these ways: time, talent, material assets, spirit, and presence. In a perfect world, we would all be capable of being generous to each other and ourselves in all of these ways. But in reality, most of us can only manage a few on a good day and perhaps none on a bad day. Or at least I have found this to be so for myself. Ministers are by definition, presumably generous people. And I am telling you today that while that is mostly true, we're human beings too, and are just as flawed and imperfect as everyone else. I say this in part to preface a story on generosity that comes from my somewhat misspent youth, with the perspective that comes with age. My father was by nature a generous person in all the ways. This made him popular among our extended family, as people would ring the house regularly, asking to speak to Uncle Tom. And I knew from experience that generally they were looking for a few things: advice, money, a listening ear, or all three, frequently the latter. Sometimes I wondered about this as a kid, as I was the designated phone answerer, why they all seemed to rely on my dad for this stuff. Because as a kid, I wasn't sure that he was all that wise. And why didn't they just figure it out for themselves? Like I said, I was young, and as a young person, I was not always capable of a wider perspective than the end of my arm. He came from a family that was poor, yet found a way to make up care packages to hand out through the train windows to soldiers heading out to World War I. He was born in 1911. Pop shared a memory of being lifted up on his father's shoulders to hand the bags through the windows of the train as it was pulling out of the station. It was within his family's power to do so, so they did it. The reason people reached out to Uncle Tom was that he was generous, and even if he didn't have the answers or the money at the time, he was able to be generous with his presence and his love, sometimes his tough love, because he could be salty. And if he eventually gathered the cash or consulted the lawyer, procured the bail bondsman, or whatever else was needed, he would deliver. The problem with Pop's generosity was that sometimes he was taken advantage of by family and others because he didn't always have the best boundaries. He was the oldest living member of our extended family, though, and as his father had traveled back and forth from the US to Italy and back again with more family members, after he had established himself here, Pop was trying to live up to a man that loomed large over the family history in this country. One day, when I was around 16, Pop decided to sell my sister's old car that she had returned to him. He put a $300 sign on the car and parked it roadside on the busy street we lived on then. Many people checked it out and then moved on, but one young man, with a ragged look, came to the door and asked to speak to the owner of the car for sale. I found Pop in the backyard and led him outside to meet with the young man. Pop and the man went to the car outside, chatting away amiably for about 15 minutes or so. Then Pop called me to get the keys. I fetched and delivered said keys, and a few minutes later, Pop came back up the driveway and the car and the man were gone. I said, "Well, I guess you sold the car." Pop chuckled and said, "In a manner of speaking, yes. I gave the car away to that kid." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. $300 was a lot of money to us at that time, and I thought Pop had been had yet again by some chiseler in the parlance of our home. I said as much to him, pretty cheeky, saying, "You bought another sob story, really?" In that way that only a teenager can muster. To which he smiled and shook his head, saying, "Yes, Mickey, really. I just know that young man needed that car more than I needed the money or the car. Someday you will understand these things." It was left at that. I was surprised I wasn't reprimanded for what I just said, and I walked away grumbling to myself about all that was wrong with the world as I saw it. A few years later, another young man, looking vaguely familiar to me, and this time in a business suit, approached the front door. He had parked a familiar old Pontiac Sunbird by the road in the same place it was when Pop gave it away. He knocked on the door and asked to speak to Tom. I got Pop to the door. He was very blind at this point. He was legally blind. And introduced him to the young man on the doorstep. The man proceeded to remind Pop who he was and said he had come by to tell Tom that he was so grateful for the car as it had changed his life. The man said that at the time Pop gave him the car, he was broke, newly married, and had a job lined up in Sarasota and needed reliable transportation to and from to take the position. He was now the father of 2 kids and had moved up in the company to a management position and was able to care for his family in a way he wasn't sure he would have been able to without that break. Public transportation in Florida, for those of you who don't live there and aren't familiar, is generally poor, even in the most urban areas. And at that time, in the sleepy Gulf Coast county of Sarasota, at the southern end of it in Venice and Northport, there was little beyond the occasional bus route. When their chat was completed and the man said farewell and went back down the driveway, there was a few moments of silence. And then Pop turned to me and said, "See, Mickey, what did I tell you all those years back? All the good things you do in this world come back to you somehow and bear fruit. It's good to be generous without expectations, because it's the way God works through us in the world." And with that, sermon delivered, the son of the failed Italian priest went back to his gardening in the backyard, growing more food for our family. Pop was a man of faith, but not particularly religious. But he could give a damn good sermon in a few sentences. Whenever I find myself thinking judgmentally about giving of my time, talents, treasures, spirit, or presence, I think of that entire episode in our family's life and remember what Pop told me about God working through us in the world. And the older I get, the more I see the wisdom and the truth of his words. For all the times that Pop seemed to be taken advantage of by people, I see now that I often didn't see the whole picture. And that indeed, it was none of my business to see the whole picture. That's God's business. And as a kid, I thought it was my business to mind. Sometimes, as an adult, I still start thinking it is my business to mind again. And the recollection of this story humbles me and reminds me of my place in the world. That is, I am here to be a helper, a generous giver, and it is really not for me to question motives or to pass judgment. And it is not for me either to lose my sense of reasonable boundaries, as I need to be able to care for myself and for those who depend on me too. It is possible to balance all of these things. And it starts with remembering the power of generosity to fuel the care and feeding of beloved community, where we all need each other to survive. It's an absolute fundamental truth. It also means that relying on each other is a reality, a necessity, and not just a nice thing to do if we can manage it. That is the essence of Pop's legacy to his family all these years later, after he has long left this earth. To the many friends of mine and my sister, he used to name the daughters, daughter number 2, daughter number 3, 4, 5, etc., my sister and I's friends, and everyone else he encountered. May we be a people of generosity in all of the ways. May we shine forth the light of divine love in our interactions and know in our heart that we are conduits for grace in this world. May it be so, and may we be the ones to make it so. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.
Michelle's sharing reminds me of something we often forget. The whole idea of sharing a bread and cup was about generosity, about how do we take care of each other and being generous and kind and giving. The first services that were gathered several years after Jesus died did not involve incense, sung prayers, fencing of the tables. That's an old Scots thing where you fenced people away from the table. It was a thing, it's called agape. You'll see we use that word. They were love meals. The idea was everybody was poor in some way, shape, or form. And so you met in house churches or wherever you could. And the idea was everybody shared the best they could. People would bring food, people would bring clothing to help each other out. It was understood people were poor in spirit, poor literally having no clothes or fear for clothes or food. And the idea was at some point you would take simple bread and share the generosity of the bread, share the generosity of the cup. We are all in this together. As Michelle said, we need community, not because it's nice, but because it's essential. I'm always reminded, this is a terrible thing to say, how dogs seem to get it, we don't. Dogs get to be a pack. You ever notice the different breeds of dogs get along real well? Everybody who walks dogs will see you get 4 or 5 different breeds of dogs. They get along right together right away. They figure out what's going on. They're right together as one big pack. They do it better than we do. The idea of generosity and caring and being a community. When you look at our faces here, we are different faces, different people, different backgrounds. But I hope I'm speaking for all of us. We need all of us together to survive, to be well, to be kind, and to be generous. One thing, at least in this congregation, you know, the clergy are not perfect. You learn that our staff is, we have a staff sign that says the clergy here are not perfect, not even close. If you're looking for perfect clergy, go someplace else. In that sense of humor and generosity, we offer bread and cup as generous welcomes and affirmations of who you are and what you are. And we celebrate our community, always open to all. Please repeat these words after me. Promise me you'll remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, smarter than you think. God didn't promise days without pain, laughter without sorrows, sun without rain. But the divine did promise strength for the day, comfort for the tears, light for the way. And Michelle will lead us in the concluding prayer.
God of grace, ever creating and restoring, you breathe life into all things and embrace us with an everlasting love. Help us to grow in wonder and awe, to embody a spirit of gratitude, and to dream generous dreams, that in gathering what we have, we may graciously offer ourselves to accomplish what you will. In your grace. Amen.
As is our way, we combine an old Irish blessing with a Hindu greeting. May the road rise to meet you, and may the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rains fall softly upon your fields. And when we meet again, may the divine in me greet and embrace the divine in you. Be at peace. Amen. Well, thank you all here this morning for being here. Thank you, Digit, for doing the tech. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Mark, for being. Michelle is, her story with her dad is always great. It's just, yes. I was thinking when Michelle was sharing, I would have said to her father other things worse. She was better than I was. 16-year-olds. Ay. Bobby Vance, thank you so much for reading and the way you emphasize the key words. Thank you. Chris and John Sloan from Port Orange. Good morning. Felix Becerra, good morning. Good morning, Gail and Tom from Port Orange. Pam from Forest Hills, Pat from Forest Hills, Rick and Judy from Miami, Maureen from Miami, Amelia Schweitzer, 10 miles west of Merritt Island, Ray Roldan in Washington Heights. Alan and Eddie are either in New York or Washington, D.C. I'm not sure. There's Ray. Read for us last time. I'll be reading again. Cecilia Alessandro in Miami, Danny Sorkin in Forest Hills, Chris Diaz in North Miami, Nikki Lindquist in Cutler Bay, Chris Lee from Korea. Taiwan. I'm sorry, Taiwan. There we go, Taiwan. And Cindy and Larry Deach from Port Orange. What a wild mix we are. What a wild, wild community. Thank you much.
Ken,
Yes.
before we sign off, I want to give a hearty thank you for the generosity of Daniel Sorkin, who has led us through book club for 2 books now.
Absolutely. Thank
We
you.
had our last session yesterday. Daniel was a most excellent facilitator of book club. He always gave us homework. He gave us videos. He gave us so much to think about. And we've learned so much about world religions and the Bible and everything through Daniel's fantastic efforts.
Thank you very,
He
thank
used
you very.
Chat GPT, he would ask questions, he would ask us to ask questions. I mean, it was really a fantastic intellectual journey that we went on with Daniel, and we're so grateful for Daniel.
Now, my understanding is he's going on sabbatical and then he'll be back doing this later on.
Well,
Yes,
okay,
he's
so-
going on, yeah.
So yeah, I am going to sabbatical. The plan is that Roy Martin will be doing a different book starting next Saturday. And as I said, we'll see how smooth or rough this transition goes. And Maureen, thank you very much for your kind words. Your check is in the mail.
No, you've really shepherded us through this wonderful journey of discovery, and I can't thank you enough, really.
Well, that means, Dan, you're going to have to come back after Roy finishes, just so you know, for what it's worth.
We'll see how that works out. Yeah.
All right. Again, one more time, Chris from Taiwan, Alan and Eddie are either in New York or Washington. John and Chris, Port Orange. Felix is here in town. Robert Vance is with that gorgeous, but look at that stuff we have in Kissimmee. Nikki is down in Cutler Bay. Amelia near Merritt Island. Cindy and Larry in Port Orange. Chris in North Miami. Maureen is near the Redland. Pat is up in Forest Hills. Michelle and Mark are living at an address, by the way, this is no lie, that the post office cannot find. Moving right along, Cindy, there he is. Digit is living in Oldsmar, by the way, in case you've never heard of Oldsmar. Neither has God. It's somewhere, it's north of Tampa. It's on the tip of Tampa Bay. Gail and Tom, who I've known since dirt was discovered in Miami. It's been that long. Pam is in Forest Hills. Pat is in Forest Hills. Rick and Judy here. Maureen's here. Danny's in New York. Chris and Larry in Port Orange. Chris Lee again in Taiwan. Thank you all much. We see you for family discussion on Mother's Day in a couple of weeks. Blessings and peace to you all. Bye-bye
Thank
now.
you.
Bye-bye.
Love you.
Be
Love you
well,
all.
everyone. Thank you,
Bye-bye,
Donna.
everybody.
Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Happy May Day.
Have a good week, everybody.